Since I announced the podcast, Lawrence, people have been writing in that are, I guess, former Wrestling Roundtable fans or maybe even current Wrestling Roundtable fans. We still get messages all the time that I just discovered the show. I wish you guys would do new ones. The main theme that I kept hearing from these messages is we want to hear the panel's thoughts on the state of wrestling in 2016, our thoughts on the current goings-on. Unfortunately, I don't particularly have a ton. You still watch every week, fast forward through Raw, watch the network, this and that. The problem is, and actually someone on Twitter said this on Monday before Raw, before everyone got their big upsurge in enthusiasm because of Sasha and Finn Balor, that it's the same old story. And that's been my problem with it basically since I stopped watching consistently every week like 9 or 10 years ago. The main theme for the Wrestling Roundtable in all our tenure, 5 years of doing episodes, is that they need to make new stars. And what we were going to talk about in our first mini episode here is something more topical than the usual weekly podcast might be. And the brand split, I guess 2.0, just started with Raw and SmackDown going back to that well again, too. And I guess the SmackDown roster, it's kind of like, let's bring the roster from 10 years ago back. But the purpose is, in on paper anyway, to make these new stars. And people are like, Dean Ambrose is the champ, and the Shield guys, and Finn Balor is going to main event SummerSlam. And that is great news. But my attitude always is, let me see them on the poster at WrestleMania. Let me see the main event, and then I'll believe it.
I think I can make your case for you in that the advertised main event for SummerSlam at the moment is Brock Lesnar and Randy Orton. So despite the goodwill that I have and a lot of fans have towards the debut of Finn Balor and the push of Dolph Ziggler, even though I think that well ran dry a long time ago, nonetheless, it does try to extend an olive branch to the fans that have been waiting for new talent, quote unquote, to get a push. Doesn't change the fact that they're still going to run a show, one of their big shows of the year, second biggest show or third behind the Rumble, where the main event, the real main event on paper to them is a part-time guy, less than part-time guy, and Randy Orton, who's kind of becoming a part-time guy. And you and I always talked about that there was going to come a time where John Cena and Randy Orton were going to become what The Undertaker and The Rock were, which is they wouldn't work every week. And Cena's transitioning into this now with all of his other projects. They would work 2 or 3 times a year on the shows that mattered. And that's kind of what's happening now.
It's been happening for a while.
It's been happening for a while, yeah. Brock Lesnar is kind of becoming the Undertaker now. They bring him in from time to time for a big match. Obviously, Randy Orton has been injured several times on and off TV.
Picking up his garbage.
John Cena, like I said, he's hosting the ESPYs and doing different reality shows, and now he's in movies. You can see where this is going. So the bottom line is, are they ever going to really commit to these new guys, including Roman Reigns, frankly, and have a show like a SummerSlam or Royal Rumble or maybe WrestleMania, forbid, they would actually do this with WrestleMania, where the main event slots are completely uncluttered by Brock, Cena, Orton? The answer to me, despite the goodwill from Monday and Tuesday, still seems to be no.
Well, the problem is that I don't know if it's just people don't learn from the past, but for instance, the other month when all the rumors were Vince actually likes AJ Styles now. And I'm like, well, if he really wanted to make AJ Styles and he cared about AJ Styles, he could have had him win the Rumble, but that might be asking a little too much. Fine. But he opens WrestleMania jobbing to Chris Jericho, just kind of like Dean Ambrose got squashed by Brock Lesnar. This, to me, does not sound like they're building the stars of the future, because it sounds nice that Dean Ambrose wins the title. People are happy about that. And AJ Styles main events the special events / pay-per-views or whatever you want to call the former pay-per-views on the network and this and that. But all that is to me is placeholders until we get to WrestleMania time.
Well, you made this point recently that you feel like the Shield guys, and then obviously to a much bigger, more obvious extent, people like AJ Styles are the guys who just hold the place for when these part-time guys come back to main event the big shows. And it's not just the part-time guys coming back to wrestle. It's also slots like The Rock and Austin and Mick Foley and Shawn Michaels getting, half an hour, 45 minutes worth of segments at WrestleMania. So to me, as someone who watches every week, it has felt for the past 4 or 5 years like the way they structure things is on these off periods, these off months between Mania and the Rumble and SummerSlam, we can do this other stuff. We can have these B shows and have them main evented by people like AJ Styles. And the network gives them the ultimate excuse for that because they don't really care so much about the pay-per-view number, so they're not relying on AJ Styles, who they don't think is a draw, or Finn Balor or any of these other guys who happen to be smaller guys, just pointing that out. They don't rely on Dean Ambrose and AJ to necessarily headline these B shows. They don't really care because it's on the network, and the network isn't a pay-per-view priority isn't a priority in the way pay-per-view was in terms of having to make sure that every month you have a big drawing name in the main event slot. Because when we used to watch in the Attitude Era, and even the last, going back as recent as 6 or 7 years ago when pay-per-view was still a factor, they would never risk main eventing pay-per-views without at least one of those names being what they consider to be quote-unquote an established star. And again, to go back to the original point, despite the goodwill on Monday, it seems it's the same trend because the focus of that show is going to be Brock Lesnar and Randy Orton, and likely whatever John Cena's match is going to be. I also want to point out this whole idea of Dean Ambrose is the champion. Now, Dean Ambrose is the champion, but he's the champion on the secondary show, and they're debuting a new title, which that title match has 2 more compelling stars in Finn Balor, the new up-and-coming exciting guy that everyone's been waiting for, and Seth Rollins, who everybody pretty much agrees out of those 3 guys is probably the best bet for a long-term investment. So that Dean Ambrose-Dolph Ziggler title match, I don't see that main eventing that show, and I certainly don't see it being as compelling as the Finn Balor-Seth Rollins match or whatever John Cena's going to do on that show. Therefore, Dean Ambrose is the champion, so what?
Well, that's why they have split pay-per-views again.
Another failed experiment from the past. Now, granted, now that they have the network and pay-per-views being moneymaker for them aren't important, they can do that. Like they did last year, they did an Elimination Chamber and a King of the Ring, quote-unquote, pay-per-view on the network only. So I'm imagining that some of these SmackDown shows or whatnot will be, network exclusive, which is a good idea. It's a good idea to have network exclusive content because it increases subscribers.
Yeah, but when it's a cool house show from Japan, that's right, a different flavor than everything else, or a show in that vein, then it's interesting. Not the usual B show from 10 years ago type style.
Well, if you put, let's say, 6 or 7 of the SmackDown-only pay-per-views as network specials a year, that means that all of Dean Ambrose's title defenses are network-only. So how important are they? Whereas Brock Lesnar's appearances are always going to be on SummerSlam, the Rumble, WrestleMania, or against people like The Undertaker or Randy Orton or John Cena, who the company considers to be real investments and real draws. In that system, Dean Ambrose is a secondary thought. He's a secondary priority. So him having the belt, to me, doesn't really say much at all in this climate. So the brand split actually hurts a guy like Dean Ambrose, and it hurts the title.
Well, like I told you recently, when AJ Styles got his big win on John Cena, people were dancing in the street on Twitter anyway, dancing on the Twitter street about this. And I quoted Magneto from the first X-Men movie to you. I said, I've heard these arguments before. Because we went through the same thing with Kevin Owens. He came in really strong. They did a great angle confronting the U.S. champ, the NXT champ on Raw. He got a big win over Cena on pay-per-view. and then they beat it to the ground, and it's back to the mid-card treadmill where these sort of, I guess, eternally optimistic fans are trying to make him winning the Intercontinental title a big deal when the Intercontinental title hasn't meant anything in nearly 20 years. In fact, I'd say the last time it meant anything was when Triple H beat The Rock at SummerSlam 98, and it hasn't meant a damn thing since then, and you know that. Stop trying to pretend that winning a mid-card title that nobody cares about, or certainly Vince McMahon, let alone you, is going to mean anything. It doesn't.
Well, especially when you're introducing yet again a secondary world title and you have other mid-card titles that are also not being used at all. And now you're going to have 2 women's championships, apparently 2 tag team championships, and the NXT championships. Plus, they throw in the King of the Ring every now and then, and Money in the Bank, and the Royal Rumble winner. With all of these quote-unquote prizes, how could something like the Intercontinental title mean anything?
It's excess. It's excess. You got 3.5 hours of the pay-per-view Sunday, 3 hours of Raw Monday, 2 hours of SmackDown, to say nothing of anything on the network like the main event or any other shows. It's too much, and all the wrestlers know it too. I love when the Big Show goes on Steve Austin's podcast and Steve Austin says all the time, like, oh, it's too long. 3 hours is too long. And then Big Show is kind of like, yeah, it pretty much is. You don't want to trash it too much, but everybody knows.
I mean, I think that it's nice as a fan to have content. It's nice, you know, if I was a kid now, to have Raw on Monday and I don't have to wait. I can watch SmackDown, which is something different, quote unquote, on Tuesday. Then Wednesday is the Cruiserweight thing, followed by NXT or whatever the order is. And then, you know, if you watch Impact, which nobody does, but if you did, it's on Thursday, I think. I don't even know if it's on Thursday. So it's cool, I'm sure, for fans who just can't get enough of this stuff. But if it's not quality, who cares, you know? Right. The other point I wanted to make is about this John Cena, AJ Styles, and the idea of making new stars, which seems to be a theme, is that it's not just Kevin Owens. Obviously, Rusev beat him on a pay-per-view, lost the next pay-per-view. I think out of the Bray Wyatt feud that Cena had, didn't go anywhere for Bray. He's still in the same slot. Dolph Ziggler may have had a token win over John Cena in one of his pushes. Del Rio, recently they brought him back. He beat Cena clean. What happened to Del Rio? He's getting eliminated in the SmackDown Battle Royal for the 6th member of the Six-Pack Challenge Championship. I mean, pretty much everybody. The real question is, when is a guy like that going to beat Brock Lesnar? When is a guy like that going to beat The Undertaker? Because you can't even get in the ring with those two guys unless your name is McMahon or you're one of the made guys, which is still to this day John Cena and Randy Orton. Right. They put Dean Ambrose in there with Brock at WrestleMania. They're champion right now. What did they do? They had
squashed him.
And he did. He squashed him decisively. So until you get to a point where it almost like beating John Cena doesn't even matter anymore. Kevin Owens did it last year, like you said, and everyone highlighted it as this example. And AJ Styles less than a year later, same thing. Have these people who are saying that this is a big, did they miss something? Did they not know the story here? Like the Magneto thing, like you said, it's not even like the second time that this has happened. It's probably like the 6th or 7th time. Go back 6 years ago to the Nexus thing with Wade Barrett. That guy doesn't even work for the company anymore. I'm pretty sure Cesaro had a bunch of matches with Cena. Pretty much everyone on the roster who's in the mid card. Sami Zayn had a match with Cena and lost to him with his injury.
This is why when CM Punk says that his run in WWE or wrestling was a failure, because he wanted to main event, and that means go on last at WrestleMania. What does he mean by that? What we all know. They can dress everything up with bells and whistles or window dressing or anything else that happens before that. But what goes last is the main event. And him and Jericho for the title did not go last, nor should it have at that point, to be fair. But
The Rock and Cena.
Right. That's why I say, look, it's great. Finn's going to challenge for the title, whichever title it is. I guess, well, first of all, Intercontinental means of the continents. So you're the best wrestler on any continent. However, the world title means more because there must be an island out there where someone's better, and it's probably Samoa. So you're the world champion. So you're the best wrestler in the world. And now that we have the universal title, then you're the best wrestler in the universe. Now we're going to get really scientific, and maybe we'll have the multiverse champion. So no matter what dimension you're in, you're going to be the number one guy. But anyway, back to Punk. he wanted to
Well,
main
you could
event.
have the you could have the space-time championship. You could have people who cross the barrier.
But the point was